Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well because today we're talking about music and we're talking about the eighth and final studio album from Sum 41, Heaven and Hell. Here you have it there. We're going to get into more details. But this is the last entry, potentially, at least for album reviews of the Sum 41 kind of deep dive. And this is a really rewarding experience because it's a band if you saw my earlier videos, I stuck with them for the first few albums and then sort of dropped off. So it was a lot of fun to kind of see where they went after, I stopped really listening to them. So I consider it their ninth album because their EP, Half Hour of Power, was about just as long as their first album, but eighth final studio album, Heaven and Hell. This is on Rise Records, their one and potentially only release on the label. It was released March 29th, 2024. I actually pre-ordered the album from the label website. It shipped from the UK 2 days before the album dropped, so finally got it yesterday, but I've listened to it on streaming over and over and over. It's recorded from 2022 to 2023. There's a lot of tracks that, and we'll get into it, some maybe in a little, from the vaults kind of situation. So what is this album? It's two sides. You have your heaven side and you have your hell side. We'll show off the back again. You'll notice there. And one kind of neat thing they did. It's a double album. You might think, oh, that must make it really, really long. No, the album itself is just under an hour. It's 55 minutes long, with the heaven side being slightly shorter, 26 minutes and a half. The hell side being 28 minutes and a half. It's a double album. Didn't need to be, could be a single disc, but you're dividing into two. You have your heaven side, which kind of is representative of the band's earlier work, their more pop punk stuff, and then the hell side, which is their more alternative metal kind of melodic hardcore side, which is kind of cool that as a CD they didn't have to, but they split it into two. So depending on what you're a fan of and what you're in the mood for, you can kind of pick and choose. Now, on the other hand, if you want to listen to it from start to finish, that's two CDs. Maybe streaming is a better option for you in that scenario. Regardless, so who's in the band at this time? So we haven't really seen many personnel changes for the last batch of albums, and that's true here as well. You have Derek Whibley on lead vocals, rhythm guitar, keyboards, piano, production, engineering, mixing, recording, and art direction. Dave Branson Batch on lead guitar, backing vocals, recording. Tom Thacker, one of the newer members to the group, rhythm and lead guitars, keyboards, backing vocals, and recording. Jason Cohen-McCallan, who's on bass and backup vocals, and Frank Zumo, another one of the newer members, on drums, as well as with the recording. There's a couple additional musicians. We have Mike Green, who's helped out on the band before with some recording guitars and keys, as well as Nick Bailey, who does guitars on the track Dopamine. Mike Green, we've talked about before, a member of the band Jellyfish, which is kind of cool. Nick Bailey, I did a little bit of research into just for a few minutes, found them on social media and a few other sites. It looks like they're known as being a session musician. They work a lot with pop punk bands and heavier alternative rock bands. So I think their addition to, or what they added to this album, totally fitting, works really well. So for singles, 4 singles for this album. The first single, Landmines, which I really, really enjoyed, came out September 27th, 2023. Rise Up, which was the first single from the Hell side, came out December 12th. Really enjoyed that one as well. Got me really excited for the album. I think that's actually when I decided to pre-order. Third single, Waiting on a Twist of Fate, which is actually the opener for the Heaven side, came out February 22nd. And on March 29th, the same day as the album dropped, they released Dopamine as a single. Not what I would have chosen, but regardless, whatever. So we're going to get into a bit of the background. Now, this is, it's a newer album, so there's not as much to build from for the background of the album, but I've found some little bits as well. So on March 23rd, 2022, the band announced the album. So a lot of people are aware that this is the band's last album because they've said they're calling it quits. I seem to remember both happening in tandem. They said, we're calling it quits and we have this new album coming out. But I did some more research, found some press releases, and I got it wrong. So they announced the album first, even the concept as well. They knew in March 2023, at least when they were announcing that they were going to have two sides, pop punk side and the heavier alt side. As well, the name. For the more heavily music inclined of you, Heaven and Hell is maybe a nod to Black Sabbath. People pointed that out. They're like, is that a reference? And it actually totally is. Someone asked Derek Whibley about it in an interview, and he actually said, obviously we know that record. So Heaven and Hell, which is one of the Dio fronted Black Sabbath albums. Obviously we know that record and love that record. And we knew that, calling it this was, well, it kind of looked at it as, we kind of looked at it as, well, you know what? They've had it for like what, 42 years? Let's have a turn here. Obviously not saying that this is, compared to Heaven and Hell or anything, but they thought, yeah, we can take that. So actually, so this is where the band announced this on May 8th, 2023. They said that they're actually going to disband next year in 2024. So they're going to do a final tour. They're touring all over, so maybe they're coming near you. And I feel like given that's a 1 month difference, so they probably knew by that time, especially because from what I can tell, they're calling it quits just because they've been doing this for a long time. It could just potentially be hiatus, just in interviews, especially Derek has said, I'd like a couple days, a couple years of my life where when I wake up, I'm not thinking about what am I going to do with Sum 41 next. That makes total sense. And then unfortunately on September 19th, 2023, Whibley was actually hospitalized with a health condition, and then pneumonia, which actually led to heart failures, which is awful. He's had a bad run of health luck. But the next day, it was reported he was responding well to treatments, discharged from the hospital, and they've actually been able to continue their world tour, which is great. So let's get into the track by track. Again, double album, seems imposing. It's not. 55 minutes for Sum 41, that's a long album. But each side kind of, I think, is your mileage will vary depending on when you heard about the band, when you fell in love with them. I did kind of right when they were getting big off of Half Hour of Power, right into All Killer No Filler. So like I still remember watching Much Music, singing the video for Makes No Difference, as well as Fat Lip, that kind of period of the band. So pretty early on. So for me, I gravitate more towards the Heaven side, the pop punk side, even though I think musicianship wise, the Hell side is much more dynamic and it actually it's more creative, I would say. But I do like me some of this pop punk. So it opens, like I said, with Waiting on a Twist of Fate. Really good opener. It has like a slightly aggressive melodic hook that they insert in there that's like a minor key bit. And it's like a hint. It's like, hey, there's going to be a lot of different stuff going on this album. It's a really catchy pop punk number. Track 2 goes into Landmines, which is a really catchy chorus. I think it makes total sense to be the lead single. There's a lot of, throughout this record, actually, a lot of sort of vocal nods to some of their past albums or themes and motifs. So like this one actually mentions Pain and Pleasure, which is kind of their alter ego 80s metal band, which I kind of enjoy a lot. So that's a fun track. Track 3, I Can't Wait, feels a lot like a Green Day song. Obviously on purpose. They've mentioned many times Green Day was one of their big inspirations when they were starting out. And this just feels like a Green Day track, like a faster, more upbeat Green Day track, not one of the more slower efforts, but Green Day track nonetheless, I like a lot. Track 4, Time Won't Wait. It's a mid-tempo number, really memorable, really catchy. It really sounds like something that potentially would have been written with or for Avril Lavigne. And given that Derek and Avril were they engaged? They were in a relationship. I think they were maybe engaged, maybe even married, which would happen after being engaged. But I don't know. They were in a relationship of some sort of legal standing. But just the way the chorus is even sung, it makes me think that, yeah, this would have fit really well with Avril's vocal delivery. And again, makes me think like maybe we're getting a bit of like a From the Vault on here. Not, we know this is our last album, let's put it all out there, but in the way that like what would work, what would fit. I like that a lot. Next track, Future Primitive, really, really Offspring inspired, which again, Offspring, one of their big influences. The track just makes me want to play, Crazy Taxi, listen to some Smash or Americana. If you're a fan of the Offspring, check out Future Primitive is more like old school Offspring. There's another track that we'll get to on this side that makes me think of newer Offspring, which is really fun as well. Then we get into Dopamine, which is their latest, potentially last single. It's like a mid-tempo, more kind of alternative rock inspired number. It doesn't really do much for me. A lot of people say, oh, this sounds a lot like Machine Gun Kelly. It's inspired by that. Machine Gun Kelly, an artist I only know a couple tracks from, so I'll take people's words for it, but doesn't really do much for me. The chorus is kind of cheesy, and I'm kind of like, okay, next, let's see what else we got. Let's keep the tempo going. Not Quite Myself, lyrically a really great song about mental health. I really like lyrically where the song goes. And it sounds a lot like something that would have fit really well from All Killer, No Filler, their first studio length or studio album. I like that one a lot. Bad Mistake is the next Offspring inspired song. Really, really heavily so. If you know the song, you're going to go far by the Offspring. Play that track, play this track. I'm not saying anything was lifted. I'm just saying you can hum one over the other and they fit. I like that song a lot. Johnny Libertine is next, which sounds a lot like something from Half Hour of Power. It's really pop punk inspired, lyrically, very fitting for like being a high school dropout, shenanigans and hijinks. Kind of weird for people of this age category to be singing about that and for it to be taken seriously, but I also don't think they're trying to have that taken seriously. They've said that this is representative of sort of the earliest parts of their career, and this track does that. I like it a lot. It's a fun tune. And then we end the Heaven side with a ballad, Radio Silence. Now, Sum 41, they've shown they can master ballads. I think their best ballad was actually their closer from their last album, Order and Decline, but even ones like Pieces from Chuck is a really good ballad. So they know how to do good ballads, and Radio Silence is an okay one. There's only 2 ballads on this album, but it doesn't feel like a great closer, unfortunately, and that's okay. And then from there, we'll go into the Hell side, which opens with sort of a very artistic, what is it called? Preparasi a salire. Salir, I don't know. We've got heavily vocoded lyric delivery happening over sort of like an artsy a cappella thing, talking about rising up, like the sun I will rise up, into the track Rise Up, which was the first single from the Hell side. And I see why they picked it, because it's a lot heavier of a track, a lot more raw and aggressive as a track. But the chorus especially is really upbeat, Jiminy Jillikers, poppy hooks in a fun way. So I think that's a really good introduction to the Hell side, especially for people that might be picking up this album because you're like, hey, I remember, Chuck or Does This Look Infected or All Killer No Filler, one of those earlier albums. And they maybe aren't familiar with the later stuff where they do get a bit more aggressive. So I think that's a good way to kind of blend those two together. Next is Stranger in These Times. The riff, like the main riff, reminds me a lot of something from Order and Decline. It's really not groove. It's not groove metal, but very groove laden. It's the kind of thing you could kind of groove along to. It's a really epic track, but there's like a spoken, not shouted, aggressively spoken section that's a little bit cheesy, but fitting for that. Next, I Don't Need Anyone, which is sort of a mid-tempo, heavier alt-rock song. I know a lot of people fell in love with Sum 41 during this period, starting with Screaming Bloody Murder and onwards, 17 Voices, Order and Decline. Because when you look at the comments for a lot of these, not just tracks, but the album, people are saying like, the Heaven side is too light. I'm not into that. I like this raw, heavy stuff. Tracks like this don't really do it for me. It's fine for what it is. It's just not a style of music I was listening to when it was popular 20 years ago. And it's not one that does really anything for me now. It doesn't tickle any nostalgia bones. That said, it does have one of the best guitar solos on this side. I will say, and I'll say it again because I did say it previously, that I think especially Browntown's inclusion on this side particularly showcases how vital he is for the band. And I think creatively as a band, how I think they get a lot more out of doing this sort of faster, more aggressive, metal-inspired poppy punk than they do just pure pop punk. And that comes off. Next is Over the Edge, which along with this track we'll talk about later, one of my favorites from the side. Really fast. It has a really good chunky melodic hardcore breakdown. So if you like breakdowns in your hardcore, check out Over the Edge. That's a fun one. House of Liars I like. It's just like a good heavy, not heavy rock, but like a heavier alt rock number. It got a different energy, different vibe than the rest of this side, and I like that. It's a little more, not subdued, but a different direction than kind of that heavier alternative metal. It's still really emotive though, and I like that a lot. Next, probably my favorite track from this side. if I was going to recommend, check out one track from the Hell side, it'll probably be this one, You Wanted War. It's also got a fantastic guitar solo, I think featuring both Dave Batch and Tom Thacker. There's a little bit of a twin guitar section. It's hard to tell, but I'm pretty sure they're kind of trading solos and then they do a little bit together, and that's a lot of fun. Next up is a weird stumble. Maybe you noticed it earlier when I showcased the back of this, but they do a cover of Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones. Kind of a weird choice. The band, they've been known for decades now as doing a really good Metallica medley. And they actually have talked about how much both Iron Maiden and Metallica have been an inspiration to them. They've talked about Green Day and The Offspring. So why are we doing a Rolling Stones cover? Especially Paint It Black has been covered ad nauseum. And their version that they do here it's the same as every other punk band that does a cover of Paint It Black. It's not bad. It's just by the numbers. It's just very fine. And it just feels out of place. It's like, why this cover? Why here? Even it's hard to listen to the song and pretend it's not a cover. If you know what I mean by that. Like they don't add enough to it to make it their own. It's fine for what it is, but we can move on. Next up is All Me. It's All Me. Next up is It's All Me. And it's a fine song, but I think by this point we're getting a little bit repetitive. We're covering a lot of the same territory we've already done. But if you're into bands like Rise Against, I think you'll get a lot out of this track. It's got that sort of melodic hardcore feel that's emotive while still being kind of fast and galloping. And they do that style really well on here. And this is a nice showcase of that. And then we end with lyrically quite on the nose, how the end begins. And it talks a lot about questioning things as they end. And is it a new beginning? And I get what you're going for. It makes sense to have this track as the last track on the album. But again, it's another ballad that I think they can do better. They've done way better ballads, and it's not a terrible track. It's just, I wonder even if just switching the two ballads around, Radio Silence, I know lyrically, not quite as fitting, but out of the two ballads on the album, I think switch them. So all that said, I still do think this is actually probably the band's best album. Very possibly, if I was going to do a ranking, which I might later, it might be number two. It's one or two, number one or number two. And I think, I've talked a little bit about here and there why I think some tracks aren't as great as others. But this is an incredibly representative album of the band, and that's what they wanted to do. They've got the pop punk side, they got the hell side. So if you want to know what this band is all about, well, rock, it's what they live for. It's what they've all about. They've told us that before. But also, give this album a spin. Kind of click around, especially because on this album, you can just go into a streaming site if you just want to check it out before you purchase it. Try some of the first batch of tracks. That's their pop punk side. Try some of the later bits. That's their heavier side. Click around, see what you want. If I'm going to recommend one of the heavier tracks, that was going to be You Wanted War. Check that one out. If you want one of the pop punk ones, I would do Bad Mistake or Waiting on a Twist of Fate. That rhymes. Waiting on a Twist of Fate is more original, more classic Sum 41. I like that a lot, but Bad Mistake is a lot of fun as well. So that said, this is the 8th and final studio album from Sum 41. Will they ever be back to rock again? Probably. Because it's just a hiatus. They can come back if they want. But as for reviews, this is kind of the end of the deep dive that I've done. And it's been a lot of fun. I'll probably do maybe like a recap, discography ranking, some sort of recap video for that. But in general, I'm happy to put this on the shelf. Got the complete discography. Am I going to go for they have a greatest hits. They have a live album. They have a couple greatest hits, actually. Am I going to go for some of the other EPs? Probably not. I'm good with having, their first EP, Half Hour of Power, and then the studio albums. But this is a fun experiment, and I was happy to have you all along for the ride. And who knows what band we'll go get into next. Catch you next time. Bye.